This video introduces reflexives, reflexive pronouns, and reflexive possessives. The word reflexive comes from the Latin verb reflecto, which means to bend backwards. Let's look at an example of a reflexive pronoun, and you'll understand why that term is used. Here's a nice example of a reflexive pronoun. The reflexive pronoun refers back to the subject of the sentence. It bends back to the subject. This pronoun, myself, is identical to the subject of the sentence, and that's what a reflexive pronoun is. Let's compare the reflexive to a regular personal pronoun. Me is not a reflexive pronoun because it doesn't refer back to the subject of the sentence. Notice that in Latin, the first person pronoun doesn't change when it's reflexive. It looks the same as a regular personal pronoun. When we translate into English, we have to use a different word, but the Latin is the same. That's true for the first person, and it's true for the second person. It's true for the first and second person singular, and it's true for the first and second person plural. It's true for all the different cases for the first and second person pronouns, singular and plural. The reflexive pronoun for the third person, however, does have a separate vocabulary word. But the good news is there are only 4 forms to learn. The singular and plural are identical. And the nominative form doesn't exist because the reflexive pronoun is only ever used for the direct object or the indirect object, or with an ablative or to express possession. Notice that in each of these examples, the reflexive pronoun refers back to the subject of the sentence. If you understand that concept, you're ready to move on to the reflexive possessive. Let's look at an example. Which word in this sentence is referring back to the subject? It's the possessive, his. His own makes it really clear that it's reflexive. But in English, we don't usually use that word own, even when we mean reflexive, and that can result in some ambiguity in English. In the sentence, she lost her phone, we don't know who her is. We don't know if she lost her own phone, or if she borrowed a phone from some unnamed female person and then lost her phone. Latin doesn't have this ambiguity because in Latin, there's going to be a separate vocabulary word for the reflexive possessive. So if she lost her own phone, the word her is going to look distinctive. It will tell us that this is a reflexive possessive. And here is the word, suus a What kind of word is that? That's an adjective, and that's important to remember because that means that it's going to be modifying a noun. It's not going to get its own case number and gender. So in this first sentence, the reflexive possessive suus a will be modifying the word room, so it will be accusative. And in the second sentence, it's going to be modifying the word grandmother. So suus a in that sentence is going to be feminine, accusative singular. You will likely be tempted to make his masculine or to want it to be masculine because of how it sounds in English. But remember that it works differently in Latin, and suus a is an adjective and doesn't have its own gender. It could be any gender, and any case, and any number. It's just modifying a noun, and since his is modifying grandmother, it's going to be feminine. In this sentence, daughter is accusative feminine singular because it's the direct object of the verb, and so therefore suus a is going to be accusative feminine singular to modify it. So in Latin that will be suam filiam, and that suam tells us that the daughter belongs to the subject of the sentence. It's a reflexive possessive. What if she dropped somebody else's daughter off at preschool? What if her friend asked her to drop her daughter off at preschool? And the her then is not referring back to the subject of the sentence, but to that friend. Well, you've already learned how to do that. You just use the genitive of the pronoun is, ea, id to indicate possession, and that's eius. I want to emphasize again that the gender and number of the subject of the sentence plays no part in the case number and gender of this reflexive possessive. It's purely an adjective modifying its own noun. So we could change the gender or number of all these subjects and it won't affect the ending on the possessive. If it's not reflexive and you're using is, ea, id, then of course the number will affect the pronoun because is, ea, id is not an adjective. So it's not modifying daughter. It's the genitive plural of the pronoun. Oh, okay, you may be confused about these forms. I'll try to explain it another way. In English, the way that we indicate or express possession for the first person is with the word my or our. My is singular, our is plural. The Latin equivalent is meius aum or noster, nostra, nostrum, and these are adjectives. They modify the noun, the thing that's being possessed. Notice that it doesn't matter what the gender of the subject of this sentence is. The gender of this adjective, meum, is modifying the noun only. Because this is an adjective, its only job is to modify in case number and gender its noun. The plural in our is part of the vocabulary word, not the ending. So this nostrum, even though it's a plural word, simply by virtue of the fact that it means our, here it's singular because it's an adjective and its only job is to modify its noun, and its noun is singular. Again, for my and our, whether the possessive is reflexive or not makes no difference in the form. Here it is reflexive. I love my own daughter. And here it is not. Do you see our daughter? But it makes no difference. The form is the same. And that's true also for the second person. But for the third person, whether or not the possession is reflexive makes a difference not just in vocabulary word, but also form of speech. So for possession that is not reflexive, you're going to use a pronoun, is, ea, id, and pronouns get their own case number and gender. So in order to express possession, you're going to use the genitive of that pronoun. And that pronoun is going to have an antecedent that will determine its gender and its number. The non-reflexive his, her, and their is only ever going to look in Latin like eius or earum or eorum. Eius is used for all genders in the singular, and eorum and earum cover masculine, feminine, and neuter in the plural. These are the only forms that express third-person possessive for non-reflexive possession. For possession that is reflexive, the idea of possession is within the vocabulary word itself. The word means his own, her own, their own. So it does not use a genitive to express possession. The only time suus aum will be genitive is if it's modifying a genitive noun. Suus aum describes possession as an adjective. The vocabulary word tells you that it's reflexive, but since it's an adjective, the grammar dictates that it modifies its noun. I need to explain one more thing to you before you'll be ready to practice, and this will take quite a bit of practice. It's the English usage that makes reflexive difficult to understand and to translate for English speakers. And to complicate this a little further, English uses what sounds like a reflexive for its intensive pronoun. In Latin, the intensive pronoun is ipse, ipsa, ipsum. In English, at least, it's an extra word in the sentence that modifies a noun in order to emphasize it. Since this word is just giving emphasis to another word, you can take it out of any sentence, and the sentence will still mean the same thing. It will just be lacking the emphasis. If you take the reflexive pronoun out of a sentence, it will no longer mean the same thing, and it likely won't make any sense. It's just unfortunate that in English, the intensive pronoun and the reflexive pronoun sound the same. But again, that's a problem with the English. In Latin, they don't sound anything alike. Okay, that was a lot of information, and if it makes sense, in theory at least, then the best thing that you can do is start practicing. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in class.